The first time I heard this song, after finishing Disco Elysium, I cried. There's an aspect to Disco Elysium's world building that I think often goes overlooked, and that's its music. More specifically, the fact that every track doesn't really register as music to me. The cowboy shootout tune that plays during the mercenary tribunal just feels natural, like it belongs. The main Martinaise theme has a corroded brass feel to it that sounds like it's coming through an old speaker. You never stop to appreciate the music because it always fits into the world so well. The music of the tribunal is just as much a part of it as the creepy skull guy, and likewise the blaring brass of Revachol is just as real as any of the city's other aspects. The sounds of Disco Elysium belong to its space and never ask you to listen, rather it asks you to internalize it and live in the city for the remainder of the game. And when the music plays for me, it doesn't bring me back to a moment or feeling like, say, an Ennio Morricone soundtrack would. It brings me back to Martinaise. Where is Martinaise? From the moment you wake up on day one, you are thrown into the rotting remains of a failed revolution. All around you are bottles and bullet holes, all the aesthetics of a sad, failing waterfront district. The harbor has a rotting corpse sticking out. You investigate a not-so-subtly named doomed financial district full of ghosts. What's interesting about Martinaise isn't that everything is self-evidently broken, it's what few things still work, what little survives in Martinaise, and why it survives. Capital is not a tangible thing, but a social relation reproduced by the continuous expenditure of wage, that is paid, labor. Marx describes capital as objectified or dead labor that only continues to exist by extracting value from living labor, famously calling it dead labor that vampire-like only lives by sucking living labor. Capital does not produce value on its own. It reproduces itself by organizing and exploiting labor power, and it is because of this that capital is fundamentally mobile, abstract, and indifferent to place. Labor, by contrast, is not. Labor is simply the physical act of working. It happens in specific places at specific times by people who need food, shelter, and continuity. Capital can withdraw when accumulation falls. Labor, that is work, cannot. Everyone needs to work to survive. This distinction becomes sharper with Marx's concept of fictitious capital, paper claims on future value like speculation, finance, and credit that are disconnected from real production. Marx is clear that when fictitious capital collapses, value disappears on paper, but fictitious capital has no effect on the material world. The stocks can plummet to zero, but doesn't matter. A guy's still gotta eat. Martinaise is exactly this kind of space, abandoned by capital and its associated growth, but still inhabited by laborers. The only thing keeping Martinaise alive is the port and its workers, and yet despite total economic desolation, there is still a stubborn small few stragglers. Your job, as the amnesiac detective Lieutenant W. Frater Harry Dubois, is to solve the case of the hanged man in the courtyard of the Whirling in Rags hostel by interrogating these stragglers, made exceptionally hard by the fact you know absolutely nothing about the world around you, its history or parties, and you just went on a manic, depressive, drunken bender, driving an employee of said hostel to quit on the spot, threatening to kill yourself, and crashing your motor carriage into the ocean. Revachol, as you can see, is a city of decades of failure, starting from the revolution to the modern-day graveyard of day laborers and foreign capital you find yourself investigating. Decades of failure that, if you so wish, you can learn about. This game has a real world's worth of history in it. One of those interesting little tidbits we will focus on is the Pale. In Disco Elysium, the livable land masses that comprise its world, called Isolas, are all surrounded by the Pale, a colorless, odorless, featureless enemy of life and matter. Imagine if our oceans were dropped into space without an atmosphere to separate it. A hostile void of nothing we can barely explain and is prohibitively expensive and dangerous to explore. It's such a nothing that the furthest anyone has gotten is the point at which firm, provable concepts like numbers do not work. In Elysium, it dominates so much of the world and its science and history that the first figure to successfully sponsor a journey into it, Dolores Day, got mythologized into a religious character with glowing lungs. The historic motto of Disco Elysium's dominant party, DeLoreanism, and its various offshoots, then goes as such: after life, death. After death, life again.
After the world, the pale. After the pale, the world again.
You, Harry, begin the game awakening in a trashed hotel room after screaming, "I don't want to be this kind of animal anymore," and drinking yourself into losing your memory and maybe mind with all those loud voices in your head.
Good. Now put it in your mouth.
The theme here should be becoming pretty obvious. Outside of political commentary, Disco Elysium has a general through-line theme of the void, of nothingness, literally, with the pale, a hostile antimatter, and also interpersonally, spiritually, loss of faith, death, the innate desire to not exist, the simplicity of and draw of nothing.
There is nothing, only warm primordial blackness. Your conscious ferments in it, no larger than a single grain of malt. You don't have to do anything anymore. Ever. Never, ever. Never, ever, ever, baby. An inordinate amount of time passes. It is utterly void of struggle. No ex-wives are contained within it. An awareness creeps up on you. A mass lies hidden in your dead angle, soaking in some lurid acidic sauce. It's bloated and shameful, a ball of meat surrounding you. This is a terrible line of questioning, and it will only lead to more awareness of the meat thing. There. No ball of meat, no light in the formless nothing, just night swimming. Coming right up, sir. Smooth passage. All right, nothing town to fuck all borough.
Harry's manic bender is symbolically paralleled to Revachol's own downfall. Revachol is economically Eastern European, culturally French, historically a deposed monarchy, and currently occupied by a Western, NATO-adjacent liberal regime. After the stomping out of the revolution, the coalition opened Revachol, turning it into a laissez-faire, free-market playground for foreign capital. All of this in excruciating detail can be discovered in-game. Disco Elysium has a near encyclopedia of its world's history, embodied by the encyclopedia skill, which will, yes, give you important context as to the current state of Revachol and the little district of Martinaise, but also will painfully frequently interrupt Harry's thoughts to tell you about a brand of motor carriage. Revachol and intentionally Martinaise are portraits of economic ruin. The global network of capital has left the city to rot. It is now only an express lane, something to be used for moving product, always money flowing through, but never staying. I believe intentionally the only businesses we see still alive are those that produce commodities with use value. In Marxist economics, use value simply means labor that satisfies a real human want or need that serves a useful purpose. This is why hostels like the Whirling in Rags or the Lonely Dice Maker fit so neatly into the logic of Martinaise. They survive not because they are profitable, scalable, or even attractive to outside investment, but because they capitalists still do something. They feed people, they shelter people, they produce something tangible, slowly by hand, for no one but the people still here. When capital leaves, exchange value disappears, but use value doesn't. People still need to sleep, people still need to eat. I'm sure someone still wants a pair of dice. What's important is that Martinaise isn't abandoned yet. It's stranded. It exists in a permanent state of near collapse, but never quite falls into nothingness. And that's because a place full of people can't retreat into the sweet lizard brain void. We never see the fishing village leave, even when you do the dirty work to make it so. The dock workers don't leave, even the whirling doesn't leave, no matter how many times an alcoholic disco cop tears through. They were here before you, Harry, they will be here after. Capital can withdraw, individuals can withdraw, but labor can't, because labor is made of people, and people are bound to place. Shared place is fundamental to labor and political life. When the dread red boogeyman communism is discussed, it is usually heated. Reading communist, or at least very far left art, means engaging with it on its own terms. So without further ado, Marx and Engles define it as the doctrine of the conditions of the liberation of the proletariat. In other words, a set of beliefs that set out the conditions to liberate the working class. It's to horribly, painfully oversimplify more of a process. One step of this revolutionary process, as outlined by Engles, is
construction on public lands of great palaces as communal dwellings for associated groups of citizens engaged in both industry and agriculture, and combining in their way of life the advantages of urban and rural conditions, while avoiding the one-sidedness and drawbacks of each.
That's why Engles places specific emphasis on shared space and communal life, not because space is symbolic despite its ability to be, but because personal belief politics begins where people are materially stuck together, and that can be a major roadblock to communal ownership. Martinaise embodies this as well. A lot of Disco Elysium wears the skin of cynicism. The people of Martinaise are abrasive. Shared space produces ideology, not necessarily harmony. Disco Elysium is arguing that labor bound to place becomes political, not necessarily revolutionary. This is where the politics get sharp. This game is mean. Free market capital has crushed Revachol. The coalition aren't exactly good guys, and the game never pretends they are. And yet every time you pick a vaguely leftist answer, Harry runs off on a Twitter communist eat-the-rich schizo rant that alarms and annoys everyone around you, especially if you are talking to actual communists. Disco Elysium critiques communism by asking what survives in contact with reality. The communards had their moment in Revachol, and they lost quite decisively. The ideology persists in the disaffected victims of capital, the citizens of Martinaise. Martinaise still riddled with the blast craters and bullet holes of a crushed revolution. And this is how Disco Elysium gets you. Revachol is on the brink of collapse, but it can't, because the ideology that dictates the game's logic says so. Martinaise will survive, even if the world is going to experience an oxygen holocaust in the distant future. Even if Harry doesn't rebuild communism, people cannot bear to leave. Labor persists, place persists, life grinds on. Perhaps the most interesting discussion we get about, well, everything we've discussed is with a bug. When you encounter the Insulindian Phasmid, it tells you plainly that the world is going to end. Literally, an oxygen holocaust. Entropy, collapse on a planetary scale. The Pale will expand, eventually engulfing everything. Disco Elysium is cruel and very critical, and it still brings me to tears with its optimism. You play the game as a drunken, depressive mess investigating a murder in a district that is poor, falling apart, and at the center of a labor dispute that ends in a shootout. And even if you play perfectly, and no one gets shot at the military tribunal, and you rebuild communism, and Kim loves you, and you get the degree, and the house, and the wife, and the... everything. Absolutely everything is still going to die and settle into a comforting, seductive nothing.
The song of death is sweet and endless. But what is this? Somewhere in the sore, bloated man-meat around you. A sensation. Like a fly to the ointment, your conscience sticks to it. The limbed and headed machine of pain and undignified suffering is firing up again. It wants to walk the desert, hurting, longing, dancing to disco music.
You can take it. You're
And
a
yet it
champion.
argues against nihilism by asking what you do, knowing reality is cruel and finite. This is Harry's arc. He doesn't defeat the void, he, at best, learns not to obey it so much. If you play him as someone trying to get better, Harry doesn't emerge as a healed new man, or even a particularly good one. He just chooses to live. He keeps working the case and accepts that pain, loss, horrible, unbearable pain and loss and failure are permanent fixtures of life and existence, and he's just going to have to keep going. Maybe it'll hurt less later on. But maybe that's naive. Just going isn't enough. I mean, look around. The city's gone to shit, the world's going to end, everyone's an asshole, and I just watched 5 people die in an extrajudicial PMC tribunal. All my friends are dead and I abandoned them. I watched them, my ideology get bombed off the face of the earth. Enter the Deserter. The Deserter, despite being a textbook twist villain, comes as no surprise. The Deserter works thematically in countless ways. The first and lesser of the obvious is that he is an amalgam of the 2 reasons we have been given for the other potential killers of the Hanged Man. We're sent after Ruby because it's assumed she killed him out of a limerent jealousy, and we pursue Hardy and his boys because, well, politics. The Deserter is both, and as any good final boss is, if you can call him that, also a comparable but perverted reflection of the main character. Assuming you play a Harry in recovery, here's what you are presented with. The Deserter completes his retreat into the void, and he stays there. Where Harry drinks to forget, the Deserter remembers everything in excruciating detail. Harry's nihilism is chaotic and self-destructive. The Deserter's nihilism is disciplined and patient. Harry retreats into the void, and it spits him back out a blank slate. The Deserter retreats into the void and stays there. The Deserter only survived the revolution by withdrawing completely from the world. He lives alone on an abandoned island, surrounded by the physical remains of his revolution that failed decades ago. Not rebuilding, not organizing, not working, not hoping. The Deserter only watches and waits, rotting alongside the ideology he refuses to let die or evolve. He speaks the language of communism, but stripped of labor, people, place, and future. The Deserter has gone stagnant in the void. After the absolute defeat at the hands of the Coalition, his belief has no relationship to the present city of Revachol or the district of Martinaise. He watches only to a past that he cannot return to, and a world he refuses to engage with. This is why he is the killer. He is not a uniquely evil character, he's not a constant force, he isn't even hinted at existing unless you count his POV being the main menu. But because his ideology has become static and untethered from people and material conditions, the Deserter shot the Hanged Man because his resentment has curdled into an ugly, static, and old soul, because the world moved on without him, and instead of accepting it, he removes himself from it. The Deserter is Harry's antithesis. Placed next to Harry, the Deserter clarifies Disco Elysium's argument about nihilism. Both men face the same truth. Their history failed them, their ideology failed them, the future is shrinking and the void is real and comforting. But Harry, at least potentially, chooses participation. He keeps working the case, he keeps talking to people, he keeps showing up in Martinaise, however badly. The deserter is a long list of nots, things he isn't doing and never will. He claims to be a communist, but his actions killed working union men. His ideology has separated from the people he claims to help. The deserter embraced the void. And that is where Disco Elysium draws the line. The game condemns retreat. It isn't asking you to believe harder, or here's a step-by-step how to rebuild communism, or how to get better, or everything's going to be A-OK, because it won't. All it asks of you is to stay. Harry is a flawed, bloated mess who has already destroyed his body with alcohol and has horrible, soul-crushing recurring dreams about his lost fiancée. And Martinaise is a dilapidated shithole, and communism was crushed so absolutely it very well may never come back, and the world is going to be engulfed in an ocean of antimatter someday. Oxygen holocaust! Harry stays. The people stay. The city stays. Dora will live in Harry's heart forever, tormenting him like the people of Martinaise prodding along their tired streets. That is Disco Elysium's unique brand of brutal optimism. Not that things get better, but that they continue. That people keep feeding each other, sheltering each other, arguing, working, surviving. That Dora remains in Harry's heart, not as salvation, in fact you are chastised for trying to find it in her, but as proof that something mattered, that the music keeps playing corroded and distant to accompany you along. And when that song plays again, it will never sound like a feeling. It will sound like Martinaise, a place that shouldn't exist anymore, abandoned by capital, crushed by history, staring down the end of the world. And things will continue still. After life, death. After death, life again.
After the world, the pale. After the pale, the world again.
The road to healing is going to be a long one. Stay the course. You will make it someday. Just remember that you've made it this far. And it's just a bit farther now. Let's finish this. I'm on your side.